Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to Outta My League. I'm Nick Diaz. So we'll get to the coaching hot board in a second, but first, I want to just tell you a quick story. So I once heard about a married couple who had gotten divorced. They tried everything for a long time, went to therapy, all these things, but they just couldn't fix it, and they ended up separating. And about a month later, one of the husband's friends went up to him and said, "Hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your divorce." And the husband just looks at his buddy and goes, "Why?" He's kind of taken aback and says, "Well, I'm sorry to hear about, I just feel bad about you and your wife getting divorced." He said, "Don't be. I was miserable. Be happy for me now." And that's what you saw last night with Coach O and Scott Woodward. Because all the texts that I got from family members, from LSU fans, the reaction that I saw from LSU fans was, boy, Coach O looks relieved. He looks just like happier. That's because he was. He even said so himself. I feel like, a weight has been lifted off of me. Because that's the one bit of truth you heard in the press conference. All that jolly good, well, Scott Woodward and Coach O are friends and buddies. No, they're not. They can't stand to be in the same room with each other. The one bit of truth you heard was that Coach O is relieved. They're separating. They're getting a divorce. And they are happier for it. They don't want anything to do with each other. And another bit of truth that I think you heard during the press conference was when Scott Woodward said, "This is strictly about wins and losses on the field." Okay, well, that's somewhat true because, let's face it, if LSU were 7-0 right now, undefeated going into Ole Miss, Coach O would not have any controversy surrounding him as far as him losing his job. Having said that, his off-the-field bullshit has expedited the process. So this was inevitable, but this just sped everything up. And look, all the people, and this is really amazing to me, all the people who now feel bad for Coach O because they watched the press conference and they bought all that, PR BS of, we're all buddies and I'm going to be so happy, I'm going to miss you guys and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And I hear people react to me saying, "Well, Nick, why can't you just remember the good times and be thankful for Coach O?" Well, I do remember the good times. I wouldn't give up 2019 for anything, even if I knew how it was going to end. I still would be thankful that Coach O didn't screw that up and he put all the pieces together. But Ed Orgeron has to now sleep in the bed that he made. But Ed Orgeron also screwed up multiple coordinator hires, didn't interview two of them. He then tries to have sex with married women who are pregnant at a gas station, tells young single moms, "Hey, I'll let your kids come to practice and practice with our team during drills if you sleep with me. I'm going to get my boy a scholarship." He fucked up more multiple coordinator hires by poorly interviewing and vetting them, and he is named in 2 Title IX lawsuits. And his reward for all of this is that he gets to say, "I was the head coach of the greatest team in the history of the sport, and I get $17 million to not work and sit on my ass." So my sympathy for Coach Ed Orgeron only goes so far. That's his reward for all of this. That's his punishment. Now, I'm not judging him for his personal life or his dating life. I don't care, all right? And I'm not saying he's guilty in those Title IX accusations. I still have a lot of questions about those accusations. I'm just saying I don't feel sorry for Ed Orgeron one bit. I'm not buying the PR bullshit that LSU and Ed Orgeron and Scott Woodward tried to sell me. I understand why Scott Woodward had to do it, but him and Scott Woodward are not friends. Make that very, very clear. Okay, moving on. Who's going to be the next head coach? Oh my God. All right. We're going to put the clues together and solve this riddle of a coaching search, because that's really what it is. It's a riddle. So here's what we know. Let's look at what we know and piece it all together. President William Tate, the new president for LSU, he wants to make a legacy hire because he is the first minority president in the history of LSU and the Southeastern Conference. He also wants to make sure that LSU very much considers hiring a minority candidate. We know that. We also know that LSU is probably no longer interested in Lane Kiffin because LSU is sick and tired of, since 2005, having head coaches who are straight out of central casting. That may sound elitist to you, but it's the truth. They're sick and tired of having coaches who fucking eat grass, who clap weird, who say, weird crap at press conferences. They're sick and tired of coaches who rip their shirt off and, smash Red Bull cans in their face and punch their jaw and say one team, one heartbeat, and everyone just laugh at them, okay? You can like it or dislike it, but LSU is sick and tired of that. They now want a silver-tongued politician with a nice family, who's well-dressed, well-mannered, well-educated, well-spoken. You can agree with that or disagree with that, but I'm telling you, that's what LSU wants going forward. They're sick and tired of this Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, straight out of Central Casting bullshit, because they don't like that as the image of their university to the rest of the world. They also don't want Lane Kiffin anymore because this will be a baggage-free hire, meaning no skeletons in the closet. Now, I personally don't think Lane Kiffin's skeletons, air quotes, I don't think they're that big of a deal, considering what we just saw from Ed Orgeron. I think Ed Orgeron is making Lane Kiffin look like a preacher man. But guess what? LSU does. And that's ultimately, they're the ones making the hire. What else do we know? We know Scott Woodward likes to swing big for the sexy hire. Jimbo Fisher, Kim Mulkey, Chris Peterson. We know this. We also know Scott Woodward likes Saban guys. And it's not just coaches from the Saban tree like Jimbo Fisher, but it's also coaches who are philosophically in alignment with Nick Saban. Here's what I mean by that. If you look at all the big hires that Scott Woodward has made, sure, they're all proven winners at bigger programs, but they all have 4 or 5 things in common. They are great recruiters. They are known as being process-oriented people. They have great attention to detail. They are known as disciplinarians in their own way. And they are at least respected in some circles for their X's and O's on and off the field, or on and off the court. And if you look at Scott Woodward's hires on other sports at other schools, he hired Steve Sarkisian. Now, I'm not saying he's a great head coach. We'll find out. But he fills all of those boxes that we just read. Great recruiter, process-oriented, attention to detail, disciplinarian, known for X's and O's. Chris Peterson, he probably fits 4 of those besides the great recruiter. Jimbo Fisher, obviously he's a Saban guy, so he fits all 5. Buzz Williams, the basketball coach at A&M, he fits all 5 in his reputation. Kim Mulkey, obviously, and Jay Johnson, same thing. Now, more importantly with Jay Johnson, I even heard an interview with Jay Johnson where he was on an LSU podcast the day he got hired. He was doing the whole media tour around Baton Rouge and around LSU, and Cody Worsham, who's the LSU sports media director, asked him, where did you learn your philosophy about coaching? What's your philosophy, and how have you molded that over time? And Jay Johnson said, well, I'm not really supposed to say this, but, I have to admit that in 2009, I started studying Nick Saban as his leadership skills, his recruiting philosophy, his how he disciplines players, how he runs the organization day to day. And I took that and I applied it from football to baseball. And I've been doing that for about a decade, and knowing that I'm preparing to be a head coach. And that's what I've been doing ever since I was at Nevada, Arizona, and now LSU. And I guarantee you, when Scott Woodward heard that in the interview process of vetting Jay Johnson, he said, that's my guy. He models after Nick Saban. And the only coach who checks off all of those boxes in this LSU football coaching search is Mel Tucker. Nick Saban tried to hire him 3 times, most of any other assistant he's ever had, if I'm not mistaken. And Nick Saban called up Michigan State 2 years ago and said, you need to pay this guy what he wants to get him away from Colorado. If you really want to win, you need to pony up more money and convince him to leave Colorado to come to Michigan State. You will be making a big mistake if you don't. There's articles, I've read them. There are actual articles proving that Nick Saban and Michigan State called each other and said, go get Mel Tucker. You won't regret it. And Nick Saban, if he likes you enough, that's enough for Scott Woodward. Now, personally for me, I see that as, okay, Nick Saban likes you. That doesn't mean you're a great head coach. I see that more as, oh, Nick Saban, maybe he's doing a favor for his boy. But guess what? It's good enough for Scott Woodward that Saban likes him that much. Now, Nick, hold on. You said James Franklin was the number 1 choice. Well, that's not what I'm saying. That's what I've heard, and from credible reporters who know and actually know stuff inside LSU, not national people. James Franklin is still very much the number one choice. He's a big, sexy hire. He's a top 10 coach in the country. He's a minority. He's a proven winner. He's known as a family man. He's great at the podium, well-spoken, intelligent, all those things. Now, it's funny, though, about James Franklin that he's actually not known or respected as an X's and O's coach. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of rumors I've heard over the past several years, listening to podcasts with Russillo and the Athletic College Football Podcast and Stanford Steve and a bunch of other people, you name it, that, I hear some things that James Franklin, he's not really respected much in the coaching industry with his X's and O's, and people don't really like him. They kind of rub him the wrong way, and there's been polls in the Big Ten, who's your least favorite coach, and they grant anonymity to these coaches, and James Franklin is up there always with Urban Meyer over the years. That may just be sour grapes. I don't think he's overrated. I think he's proven that he can win at Vanderbilt and Penn State, but that's just something that I've heard. So if we're going off of resume, James Franklin clearly has, as a head coach, proven more than Mel Tucker, obviously. But if you actually look within coaching circles, Mel Tucker is way more, and I mean way more respected and highly recommended than James Franklin. It's interesting. But here's the bigger problem with James Franklin. That stuff, whatever. Here's the bigger problem with James Franklin. James Franklin has 2 Title IX issues and allegations against him at 2 different schools, Vanderbilt and Penn State. The last 2 times he's been a head coach. At Vanderbilt, he's 4 players were accused of gang rape. I think maybe they were convicted. I don't know. And one of the players said that James Franklin told him to delete the photos and videos of the rape or incident off of his phone. Penn State, 2018, 2 players had gotten to a fight. One of them pulled out a knife. It was broken up, and James Franklin, supposedly one of the players said, James Franklin said, "Don't report this to the police. We'll handle it internally." Another Title IX allegation. Now, of course, none of this was proven, but unfortunately in the world we live in, and I'm all about innocent until proven guilty, but unfortunately this is about public relations for LSU. And that may come into be a bigger problem than, hey, we're hiring a guy with 2 Title IX allegations against him where he was the head coach at 2 different schools, 2 different instances, and the stories are very similar in that, hey, coach told me to do this to try and cover it up. That may get in the way of the fact that he's a big-time coach who's a minority, which means President Tate and Scott Woodward, that's one of the things that they can get on board with. If you're going to hire a minority, make sure it's a proven head coach. Now, here's where Mel Tucker does not have a qualification of all the things that I've listed. He, at least at the moment, is not a sexy hire. But let me say this. They are 7-0 and in the top 10, and they have a bye week, and they play Michigan in 2 weeks. Let's say he goes 10-2 and beats Michigan in 2 weeks, or even goes 11-1, and his only loss is to Ohio State, who's immensely more talented than everybody in that conference. Or, more importantly, Michigan State wins the last game of the season against Penn State, coached by James Franklin. Now, I don't think you should make a hire based on one game. Matter of fact, I think that's pretty fucking stupid, nor even just one season. I tell people this all the time. Nick Saban went 6-5 his first 4 years at Michigan State and had a losing bowl record. Had a losing bowl record at Michigan State and only went 9-2 his last year there. Every other year he had 5 losses every single year. Averaged 6 wins a season, first 4 years. But there's context to this. He inherited a bad program. The recruiting budget wasn't very big. He inherited issues and recruiting violations from a previous staff that he had to clean up. You see, there's context. And the context to Mel Tucker is that he took over Michigan State in February of 2020, a month before the pandemic. And if in his second season he takes that and goes 10-2, and beats Michigan 2 years in a row, or upsets in Ohio State or Penn State. That's PR, and that's a sexy hire enough for Scott Woodward to sell to LSU fans. That's like Big Ten Coach of the Year, which he's probably going to win, and be up for National Coach of the Year, which he will definitely be up for. But the last piece of the puzzle to all of this mystery that we're trying to solve is that Scott Woodward is a guy who's all about relationships. The reason why Scott Woodward gets what he wants is because he knows how to build relationships. He's a politician, studied politics in college. That's what he's all about. That's how he gets what he wants. And in the year 2000, LSU hired a young 30-something-year-old named Scott Woodward to work in the athletic department. And in 2000, LSU hired a 28-year-old defensive backs coach named Mel Tucker. If you're still surprised at Mel Tucker being named as a top candidate for LSU, guess what? Now you don't need to be. And as I'm recording this, I wanted to add this little nugget. Earlier today, Vegas Odds came out with who is likely to be the next head football coach at LSU, and Lane Kiffin was number one, and they had James Franklin, Billy Napier, Luke Fickell, but Mel Tucker was all the way down at number 10. Well, about an hour ago, those Vegas odds have been updated. Mel Tucker is now plus 200 to be the top choice to replace Ed Orgeron at LSU. Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, or follow me on Twitter and Facebook in the description link below.